Today I want to be talking about the flow of life and what anxiety really is. Basically, I want to tell you all the things that you never ever heard of anxiety, because these are my theories and theories that actually came to be coming of use in the practical and empirical usage of my practice. And therefore I want to share them with you, so that if you struggle with mental health issues, if you struggle with anxiety, this is something that will bring you a lot of relief, a lot of paradigm shifts, and hopefully, you will feel better having heard what I have to say. I know it makes me feel better, and I know it makes my clients feel better. So let's get started. Anxiety is widely considered in, the psychological, the counseling area as a problem, as an obstacle, as something that needs to be fixed. What I'm seeing anxiety as is not only just a symptom, but it is also something good. Please don't switch this off just yet before you hear me out. I'm not saying it is easy, I'm not saying it is fun, I'm not saying this is something you can enjoy, but it is good in what it's pointing at. Like every symptom, any symptom, physical or emotional, this is an information. This is a piece of information that you can use in order to do something with it. And if you have struggled with anxiety with any number of years, for example, or decades, it may be really hard to comprehend that it's a symptom, because it has lasted so long that it has become a part of you, and you might be thinking like, this is something I just have to live with. This is something that is just never going to change. I heard that so many times. People defend their anxiety because they've never seen any hope in changing it. So they think this is basically who they are. And if you are hopeful about healing your anxiety, you might be very relieved to hear that. So what anxiety is, in essence, it's a resistance of what is and what is unfolding. And I want you to really, really anchor this in your memory, as I have a tendency to say, just really let it sink. Anxiety is a resistance to what is, to the present moment, and to what is unfolding. Anxiety is a form of defense that is happening when we think there is a story in our mind that tells us that we're not ready to step into our bigger self, into the next level. What do I mean by this? Life is always rushing forwards, and we are supposed to keep up with life. We're supposed to be moving, changing, unfolding, transforming all the time. And there will be a different pace for different people. We all have different innate blueprint, as a seed has a blueprint of what kind of plant is going to become. So the tempo, the pace will be different for all of us. But anxiety and also all the negative emotions, I speak about this in other YouTube video, is pointing to misalignment to our core self perspective, which allows us to see the present moment and acknowledge it as something that is a result of something we have outgrown most of the times. Well, actually always. And any sort of anxiety or negative emotions like fear or anger is always pointing us to a narrative we have about a situation. So anxiety very commonly is this sort of fear-based, defensive kind of narrative that we have, and then our body produces this feedback in the form of tension, emotions, and kind of the resistance, the bracing, the heart racing, and all the anxious symptoms, like the bodily symptoms that you have had experiences in the past. And what is happening in that narrative, it really wants to defend the construct of reality that you are used to living. So whatever past beliefs, whatever past coping behaviors and habits we have developed, these create the personality we have right now, and they represent also the reality of the world that is existing to us. So, for example, you might have an idea of yourself that you are this kind, empathetic, helpful person that is just so good, that is trying to help people, that maybe cares about everyone. And you have developed maybe some habits, perhaps pleasing, or maybe kind of putting yourself in some kind of a box to make others comfortable. So you could be like dimming your light a little bit because this person that is close to you is insecure in essence, and they would feel threatened, or they would feel even worse if you were shining your light. So unconsciously, what you're doing, you are putting yourself in this kind of more digestible form or packaging that would make it easier for others to tolerate you, to accept you, right? So this is a construct of both the self idea and how the reality reflects this to us. So we're going to be attracting all these people by exercising these habits and showing up with these behaviors, that people that are just seeking this comfort and reassurance, they will be flocking to us, and there'll be all these sensitive and desperate and all the victimized kind of people around you, or maybe kind of narcissistic types that need reassurance because, of course, they are deeply insecure. So your reality is basically reflecting your inner construct. What anxiety is pointing to at this moment is your inability to notice that you are way bigger than what it is happening right now. You are simply denying and failing to accept that your potential is so much bigger, is simply just trying to burst through this. And the tension that you are feeling is just resisting and just trying to keep it locked down, as in like a pressure cooker. So actually the bodily reactions that are happening when you are doing this are very well aligned to exactly what is happening. So the tension, meaning you have to tense your outer shell to contain the greatness of yourself, the greatness of your core self that is just telling you that you are so capable, that you are so awesome, that you are so lovable. And all that you're doing and projecting outside through your behavior, through your thoughts, through your actions, is just mismatching this great potential that wants to be born, that wants to unfold, because we're constantly like birthing a new self throughout the lifetime. And you're just constantly trying to contain it. And maybe, you know, your anxiety shows up in kind of defensive patterns when you are constantly trying to prove yourself. You just trying constantly explain these people. They don't see what you're saying. Like, how can they not see what you're saying? How can they not understand you? How can they oppose you? But what's happening in this example is that your core self is asking for you to validate yourself, not wanting these people to approve of you. Maybe you don't belong in this circumstance anymore. So trying to prove yourself to this boss in this company or impress these people that just simply are like, they're not seeing your gifts. They can't acknowledge what you're trying to say. What's your idea? Meaning, you shouldn't be putting all that effort in the circumstance. These people simply don't belong in your life. All you need to do is to shift where you express your ideas, where you express your truth, and say it with such force, with such conviction that really should be happening, knowing that the right people will come and find you. And when you're anxious, there is this constant feeling like it's you paddling against life, like you against the world, right? I know that so many women that come to work with me have this feeling, and I had this is almost palpable sense of going against life, or life being against you. But the perspective is somewhat different. It's not life going against you, it's you going against life. Like I said, life is in constant motion, and we need to be catching up with life in through that process of unraveling, becoming more of who we are meant to be, like that acorn that is sprouting and then it's growing from the seed. But it all needs to happen with respecting who we are, rather than following these old notions of what we should be doing at any stage of life, which is coming up with all those levels of anxiety, because we are simply not following our path. We are following someone else's path, or the path that, you know, other people follow or we think is good for us. So it's all about following your truth. Anxiety is really asking you to answer that call to become more of who you are, to step into your potential, to own your power, to own your ability to validate and empower yourself over and over, which means going against the grain, which means going against, you know, what people might think of you, what, you know, what society would think about your ideas, what, you know, maybe your family or your friends will talk behind your back when you show up as who you're supposed to be. And this fear is what keeps us small. It keeps us thinking that we're going to lose all these connections, all these people, when we step into our power and when we want to, you know, share our gifts. But it doesn't have to be that way. Yes, you might lose some people in the process, but it's not a real loss. It's letting go of things that no longer serve you. if you want to step in your power. You cannot have both. You cannot be comfortable and live empowered and live your dreams. You cannot have both. You have to choose whether you want to try and hold on to the old, or whether you want to catch up with life. And honestly, there is really just one option. We have to keep moving with life, because if you try to grasp, if you try to control, if you try to be comfortable and seek that safety through the old ways of being, through the old coping mechanism, you will always be faced with crisis that, you know, slaps you around, as I say, kicks your butt, so that you have to catch up with life. But then it happens in a much more painful way. And this is something I've experienced a number of times. This is what brings many clients to my practice. And like, it's not something you really want to do. That's why you want to really be intentional and conscious about making your choices, making decisions for yourself, knowing that anxiety is calling you to step into adventure, to step into the mystery of life. I get you want to control the reality. I get you want to feel safe in certainty, but this illusion of safety always brings us into a crisis and breakdown, because, like I say, like, you cannot cheat life. You have to keep moving, and that means stepping into uncertainty over and over and over. And I just have to give you a little bit of a personal context to this from someone who experienced anxiety for so long, and that was still after a long phase of 3 decades of my life, where actually the emotions were too big for me, that I had to numb out completely. So for 3 decades I didn't even feel anxious. It all was coming up as in physical symptoms, as in disease, as in pain, as in palpitations, as in dizziness, as in constriction, tension, and all the syndromes, allergies. All these were happening on the bodily levels because I was simply too afraid of feelings, right? And when I healed the disease, then I was feeling really great for a number of years, until I have outgrown this stage again. And this is when anxiety kicked in, because it was telling me that I should upgrade my consciousness again to let the unfolding of my light to happen, to let the unfolding of my personality and my truth and my gifts to happen. And at this time I didn't know all these things. It was still something I had to battle with. And on one hand, it is really good that I never went into like counseling or psychotherapy, because I know from my clients how much damage it does. People come to me and came to me broken by the medical system, both from physical issues and mental, problems that they had. And they were stigmatized and they were pathologized as someone who has to fix this problem, right? But these medical communities can't simply acknowledge the fact that we are constantly in the process of unfolding and trying to contain ourselves back into like this manageable and fixed part is simply not going to happen, because you cannot go back. You never should go back to the state before anxiety, if that ever was existed for you, or before the whatever condition you are struggling with, there is no going back. There is always moving forwards. And all these difficult, very painful emotional states need to be observed as something that is an opportunity, that signals to us an opportunity for change, for an empowered perspective of deciding and taking a conscious choice of like what is really unfolding, what is really breaking down, what am I trying to hold on to, what am I so afraid of letting go and letting go to pieces, really, that I'm still grasping with this anxious mind because I really want to keep things together. But if this is happening, if this feeling is happening for you, I say for you because I don't say to you anymore, it's happening because you are meant to step into your bigger self. You're meant to take an action. You're meant to take choices that are aligned to your progression, and observing and acknowledging the potential that is birthing through this. You're not meant to play small. And anxiety is simply pointing to you that you are thinking too small. Yes, there are some nuances depending on the situation. I could really explain that to you if you were being coached by me. But to generalize the condition of anxiety, if that's a pattern in your life, you want to inspect the thought patterns, the stories that you tell yourself, where you think you should be versus where your core self, where your innate blueprint is wanting to unravel. What is that truth that you're supposed to see in your life that you have been denying, and you have outgrown this phase that was maybe serving you? It got you here, but it won't get you there. All the coping behaviors that you have managed to develop that got you where you are, they're not going to take you to another level. You need to change. The main change that needs to happen is related to trusting life and trusting yourself. Anyone who struggled with anxiety knows that is like the opposite of trust. You simply don't trust anything good is going to happen. Anxiety is this sense of needing to control and reassure that everything will be according to your plan, that nothing will get out of what you had predicted, that whatever you want, whatever outcome you want, is going to happen exactly as you want it to be. So there is this allowing of what I call the unfolding, right? And what needs to happen, you need to start trusting. And, you know, it's a process. You need to go through certain stages to allow yourself to trust. Because if you've never gotten to this point, how can you know, right? And because I have gone through all these stages, and I have gone through all the stages from numbness, from dissociation, from struggling with severe anxiety, and to setting myself free into acknowledging exactly the truth of all the negative emotions, the so-called negative emotions. I'm just calling them as most people call them. But when we are able to see the truth behind what's happening, we can navigate the process of moving to the next stage in the way that brings you towards embracing the wholeness of your humanity. Anxiety is really not something you have to fix. And I want to dedicate a whole episode to talking about this. It's not something to fix. All that needs to happen is you need to start trusting yourself, and you need to start trusting the unfolding and the universe to catch you as you take the aligned choices that help you align with that potential of yours. And coincidentally, this is when anxiety goes away. It just has no service to do. There is no need for it. It's just a symptom. It's just like a fire alarm. When you don't have a fire, it's not going to make the noise anymore, right? So it's the same with negative emotions, but it's the same with anxiety. Basically, it will cease to exist when you align yourself to where you're supposed to be. Tension is simply pointing to you being stretched away from where you have to catch up on, because this is where you're supposed to be. You're supposed to be aligning with your true self. And I'm not saying where you should be, like your shoulds that used to telling yourself, that is very present to all the people with anxiety, where they constantly say to themselves, I should be already having this success, or I should be having this amount of money, or I should be already driving this car, or having this house, or having this amount of clients, or accolades, or achievements, right? So these are constructs, the shoots of the past self, which if you decide to follow, you are actually moving farther and farther away from your truth, from your true potential. So you are just like completely missing the mark. And that's why driven women, driven people, intelligent people who are supposed to being aligned with unfolding of their real potential, unfolding of their gifts, they often suffer with so much anxiety. It's like the statistics are just so clear on this. You just need to know how to interpret these. But because of what society tells us we should be doing, what we should be expecting of ourselves, we are completely missing the mark and driving ourselves into that anxiety and staying in that anxiety based on following goals and objectives that we shouldn't follow. I'm not saying you shouldn't have success. I'm not saying you shouldn't have abundance. You will have these when you align with your true potential, and you will do it with more ease, because it will become a path of least resistance. It will become a path of a total following of your authentic truth, when the gifts that you are expressing are actually what you want to be expressing, rather than what you decided is going to sell well, or that you decided based on the conditions, the old ego mind, that is a nice packaging, that this is what people want from you and this is what you should be serving. And anxiety is usually pointing you to also that misalignment of purpose. Now, bringing yourself to alignment and to your truth in sharing your gifts, in connecting with people, happens through aligned choices. You can only live your truth if you constantly take aligned choices. I think this is a completely essence of all of my work, because this brings so much empowerment and it shifts completely perspective into a perspective of creating life rather than fixing life. And therefore I created this free guide you can follow for aligned choices. This is something I use on daily basis. I use with my clients, and there is no excuse for you not to start making aligned choices that actually help reduce and make anxiety in your life redundant when you take aligned choices. So you can download this from the description of this episode. Now, I completely appreciate that my view on anxiety is very controversial and very unpopular. And I understand that many psychologists will completely say this is insane. But there are some theories, such as theory of positive disintegration by a Polish psychotherapist from the 20th century, that point to exactly the same discoveries. It's not as spiritual as what I propose, but is definitely in psychological terms pointing to the same idea of a positive outlook on for anxiety and many other emotional and mental issues, and also crisis and breakdowns, to be viewed as something positive. And like I say, there's views anxiety, for example, as a transition, as an opportunity to transition towards something much, much better. I like talking about anxiety, breakdowns, crisis, and all these unpleasant events as a calling from our spirit, as a call from something bigger than us, something that connects us to life, to like really slap us around and wake up from the illusion that we were living in, and we were fueling this status quo of how things were. And that's why with anxiety and with any crisis, it may feel like what has worked before doesn't work anymore, right? You just have this weird baffled idea that you are somewhere in between, that you are not in your past life, like nothing is really working as it used to, or maybe you don't see things as you used to, but you don't yet see things as they could be. You're just kind of somewhere in between states. People don't really see that, but this is what I also feel is what brings us into the physical state of tension, because we are torn in this inner conflict between what we think you should be fitting in and forcing ourselves into making things work in certain ways, before we know what are different ways of operating, different ways of existing and being and taking action and thinking and observing reality. Einstein said, and like he had so many great quotes, he says that a mind cannot solve a problem that the same mind created. At any given point, it's really hard to see besides of the stories and narratives that you have. And for this reason, it is really helpful. It really points to the benefit of having a mentor, or having a guide, or having a coach, or having someone to point you to your blind spots. And you can also do it on your own, like you can journal, you can start exploring and questioning your ways of thinking. There is so much you can do and be empowered to solve some of these old mysteries that have been baffling you, the old patterns and all these kind of questions. You can really go into challenging the old mindsets, the old mind frames in journaling. And this is what I do all the time, pretty much every day. I've got a ton of journals already, and this is where I come out with so many insights from all my ideas for these episodes, all my processes in working with my clients are really a result of my like over a decade of journaling really extensively and really not letting anything that I wouldn't address. I would not leave a subject until I've looked at it from different perspectives and challenged my idea of where I thought I was right about things. According to my new tradition that I have for this channel, I want to share a takeaway. I want to share a pearl of wisdom that maybe you can reflect on if you want. It's just my perspective that I think is good to have one takeaway from each episode. And I think from this episode, the pearl of wisdom, and from all the years I struggled with anxiety, would be that anxiety is just a symptom that we are resisting the unfolding of life. I hope it will bring you some of your own insights. I hope it's useful for you. It's a good perspective to have, that it empowers and fuels you with hope, and it will change something in how you feel about this condition, because it's not a problem that you have, it's just pointing to something greater about you that you're not yet seeing. If you want to tackle some of your own challenges, if you want to commit to your own transformation on a deeper level, feel free to reach out to me for one-on-one coaching, and you can find the link in the description of this episode. For now, I hope you will have an amazing week ahead, and I will talk to you very soon.